Hey guys, my name is Moon and welcome back for more Umineko When They Cry. So last episode we had a heated conversation rivalry, right, between Natsuhi and Ava last time, right? It was pretty good. Ava being suspicious of Natsuhi, right, if she actually saw Kinzo that morning, right? Because yeah, she was the last one basically who saw Kinzo, and then she's accusing her like maybe she did something because he's missing now, right? And then yeah, and the ending again, Maria, right? I think the trigger for Maria is whenever we talk about like the witches, right? She turns into that other personality. Whenever they talk about, I mean, I guess not just witches, but yeah, witches, magic, spells, all of that thing, she just shifts into the other personality, right? I guess in the beginning it was much more tame when they were talking about Beatrice right in front of her portrait. She did not transform like that. But now with everything that is happening, I guess Maria is getting like super excited about stuff, and that's why the other personality shows up, right? Something like that. Other personality being possessed. Who knows? But yeah, let us continue. The uncomfortable atmosphere continued even after those two left. It was thick with the idea that simply thinking about the culprit's identity would be the same as deciding whom to suspect. It had begun to feel like a discussion of the case was itself taboo. So no one mentioned the case, at least out loud. However, those thoughts were what filled our minds. All that we couldn't say aloud made our heads feel like they were going to explode. So at least on the outside, the parlor had once again regained its calm mood. Everything was left unsettled.
少しだけ雨足が弱まった気がするね。
But it's quite funny though. As a conversation between characters gets much more intense, right? The rain gets intense as well, right? And the music becomes super loud. It was super loud last time when Natsui and Ava were doing their stuff, right? Everything was loud.
まだいっぱい降ってるよ。おー。
仮にやんだって、この島には船がねえんだしな。船が明日すぐに来てくれりゃいいんだがよ。洋館バカンさんもうお腹いっぱいだぜ。
母さん、明日船はいつ来るのかな。
本来なら帰りの船は今日の3時に来てくれることになっていました。
3 o'clock. 3 p.m.?
先方も台風が過ぎてから出直すと電話をしてくれたでしょうが、あいにく電話は普通ですから。でも向こうも子供の使いではありません。客人の方々の送迎目的だと教えてありますから。おそらく明日の朝一番で、多分9時頃に来てくれるでしょう。
Okay, 9 a.m. It was completely black outside. When I looked at the clock, I realized that it was just past 7. I was starting to get hungry. In the kitchen, Kumasawa was cooking enthusiastically. She had laid out a variety of dishes, and while they didn't match the level of Goda's artful cooking, they were still quite gorgeous. It was an act of kindness from Kumasawa, who was trying to enliven everyone's low spirits with some food. Kumasawa wasn't nearly as talented as a professional cook like Goda, but she was far from unskilled. On the contrary, since she had been brought up in a fishing village, the simple food she created was something highly praised. Kanon agreed or arranged the food Kumasawa had finished creating on plates under her direction. Kanon also helped in the kitchen sometimes, but since he was rarely placed in that role, he was slightly awkward even though he tried his best. Self-conscious about the fact that he couldn't cleverly arrange the food, Kanon's expression darkened slightly. But Kumasawa smiled as though everything was fine.
きれいに盛り付けられてますよ。カノン君もお上手ですよ。
シャノン姉さんだったらもっと綺麗に。
Kanon stopped arranging the food for a bit and then hung his head. Shannon was the one who always assisted Kumasawa in her cooking. Tonight, Kanon was doing it instead. And as he remembered Shannon's face in her brutal end, he grimaced.
今は忘れなさい。
Genji spoke kindly to Kanon as he advanced a pawn. Nanjo had escaped from the parlor once the mood had grown sour and Genji had become his opponent in a game of chess upon Nanjo's request.
はい。今は忘れます。
それがいいだろう。
Genji purposely refrained from facing Kanon as he spoke. He did so because he understood that it might make things tougher on Kanon if he noticed that someone was looking at his eyes. Nanjo also understood that, and he held back any thoughtless words.
金蔵さんもどこへ行かれたんでしょうな。ご無事だといいのですが。
わかりません。ただ全ては親方様が望まれ仕組まれたことのように思っています。それを邪推することは親方様にお仕えする家具には過ぎたことです。
Why is he also calling himself furniture? Isn't Shannon the one calling them furniture? I think Kanon as well, but why is Genji saying this?
源氏さんは怖くないのですか。私には今夜まだ何か良くないことが起こるような気がして怖いのです。
I mean, something certainly will. Probably. Highly likely, right?
怖いことなど何も。
I think so.
私はただ後ろ宮家にお仕えするだけですので。
Nanjo sighed through his nose and made a carefully considered move. Nanjo was very slightly dubious. Could Genji possibly thinking that he'd be left out of this? He couldn't even imagine what was happening inside this mansion. But he definitely couldn't deny the possibility that Kinzo had devised something. If you liken this island to chess, I mean, Kinzo had opened the game and as a result, 6 pieces had been defeated. How many pieces is a chess? Yeah, I've never played chess in my life, so whenever they talk about this, it's hard for me to relate. Yeah. Could it be that Genji was calm because he believed he alone was on the outside of the chessboard and therefore safe? Nanjo thought about it. So if we're looking at it, Kinzo is definitely the king, right? I don't know. Isn't everyone just a piece on this chessboard lined up equally without exceptions? And the servants are the pawns? Is that it? So we have 4 pawns? No, we have 5 pawns though. I'll check later. Yeah, on my own. How many chess pieces are there on each side? Wasn't even Genji who had gained more of Kinzo's trust than anyone? No. He was confident of his position as Kinzo's only close friend. Just another one of the pieces laid out on a chessboard.
源氏さん、私は今夜が本当に怖いのです。無事に明日の朝を迎えられることを心より願っています。
The guest room Ava and Hideyoshi moved into had originally been built to house guests before the guest house construction. So until a few years ago, they had stayed in these rooms every family conference and were very, very familiar with them. This room was just like a room at a hotel with a bedroom and a bathroom. So even though they were still shut in, it was far more comfortable than the parlor.
やっぱり家族だけだとリラックスできるな。他のみんなも
客室にこもって鍵をかけてりゃええんや。
夏日姉さんが客間を出るなって威張り散らしてるんだもん。誰も口答えなんてできないでしょ。あの人、ずーっと冷や飯を食ってきたから、兄さんが死んでやっと天下が来たって張り切ってんのよ。まったく、ずうずうしいったらあらしない。
まあそう言うな。夏日さんもあれで結構頑張っとるんやで。お前もそう突っかからんでもええやないか。さっきのレシートの件もあそこまでは言い過ぎやで。
だってあそこで言わなかったらもう言うタイミングがないんだもん。
Eva, sulking cutely and looking at the television, sat alongside Hideyoshi, who was lying on the bed.
でも、こうして二人きりになるのはずいぶん久しぶりよね。
そうやな。思えばわしもお前も老けたもんや。ジョージが生まれてから何もかもがあっという間や。
本当にあっという間よ。子供を作るの焦りすぎたかしら。
But I do wonder though, right? How did Eva and Hideyoshi come together, right? Maybe because of business, but yeah, the way they look, or no, not the way they look, or how they act, I mean, is yeah, they love each other, right? It's not like, for example, like Kraus and Nazi. Like it didn't actually, they didn't feel anything there, right? And like Nazi was just there for, what do you call? What did Kinzo? Was it Kinzo that said it? I forgot what he said, but yeah, compared to Kraus and Nazi, Eva and Hideyoshi, yeah, they love each other, right? So how did they match? I mean, because when you look at them, it seems like they're very, very opposite, right? Like Hideyoshi, when he talks, he's like a good guy, a normal good guy. And then when Eva talks, always mocking people, like very cocky, right? So yeah, I want to see that. But yeah, I doubt we'd see something like that though, right? This story of their relationship. Eva's eyes looked like they were staring off into the distance. Yes, she had thought of it as a once-in-a-lifetime chance. Her older brother Kraus had been unable to father a child for quite some time. 6 years passed after his marriage to Natsuhi without any signs of pregnancy, which didn't please Kinzo at all. Eva herself had thought that, since her name would be moved outside the Oshiromiya register when she got married anyway, it didn't matter whether a successor to the headship was born or not. And then one day, she had a heavenly revelation, or maybe it was the whispering of a devil that she had listened to her greed. If she could give birth to a successor first, wouldn't she be able to remain in the Oshiromiya register? If things went well, might she have a chance to inherit the Oshiromiya family herself? When she proposed this to Hideyoshi, he had approved of it instantly. This wasn't because Hideyoshi also had a greedy thoughts. For Hideyoshi, who had no close relatives, it was a chance for him to feel once more the long-forgotten thing called family. So when they got married, he hadn't fussed over which last name they were to keep, and had quickly agreed to have his name entered into the Oshiromiya family register. It hadn't been easy to persuade Kinzo, but as his daughter, Eva knew Kinzo's personality well. So by choosing a time when Kinzo was most dissatisfied with Natsuhi, she was magnificently able to make him accept Hideyoshi as an adopted son-in-law. Looking at Hideyoshi, who had achieved success after starting from nothing, Kinzo might have seen a little bit of himself. He quickly grew to like Hideyoshi and approve his transfer into the Oshiromiya register. George would eventually become the successor to the Oshiromiya family. They had raised him strictly with a purpose in mind. He had been worth their while and had grown into a fabulous young man who wouldn't disappoint no matter where he went. That was why he had not been permitted to fall in love with a servant like Shannon. So when she learned that Shannon was dead and the engagement was now invalid, though part of her had still been shocked by the gruesome crime, part of her had also been relieved that her dear George wouldn't be stolen by some servant girl.
私、クラウス兄さんのことが昔から嫌いだったわ。偉そうで威張ってて。
I mean, he is a successor. Yeah, he would be swaggering around every time. Of course.
自分がやがては当主になるのだと自慢してて。だから、それに一矢報いてやりたかった。でも、それは子供の頃の感情なのよ。でもその感情は、それだけならまだいい。その感情は、あなたやジョージまで巻き込んで振り回してしまった。
エヴァ、備え自分を責めるな。
Hideyoshi got up and held Eva's shoulder. She could feel a warm understanding from him.
わしはな、自分の人生はもうとっくに折り返しに入っとる。でもな、今日までの生活を後悔したことは一度もないで。一度もや。エヴァと一緒で他の男どもじゃ味わえん楽しい人生になったと思っとる。戦争で身寄りを失ったわしにもう一度家族のぬくもりを教えてくれた。だから後宮の家には感謝しとるし、わしの唯一の家だと思っとる。わしとお前が歩んできた人生にな、今日までほんまに楽しい人生やったで。
ありがとう、あなた。
Eva hung her head, burying her face in Hideyoshi's chest. Probably no one in the parlor could even imagine that this side of Eva existed. Kinda true though, right? Because yeah, whenever we see her, or the people will see her when she's talking, yeah, she's always talking like that, like the mocking style, right?
感謝するのはわしや。今日までお前と一緒にいて後悔した日なんてあらへん。
私もよ。あなたと一緒になれてよかった。
ジョージももう立派な大人や。わしが見張ってなくてもしっかり仕事ができる一人前や。で、正月あたりをのんびりモルジブあたりで過ごさんか。わしら二人水いらずや。
いやよ。毎年年賀状の返礼で寝る暇もないとか言ってるじゃない。
次の正月だけはなしや。年賀状はみん。黙って下のお年玉くじだけチェックするんや。今年はカラーテレビくらい当てたいで。
やだ。モルジブでお年玉くじのチェックなんてしたくない。
じゃあそいつもなしや。水いらずのんびりでジョージが生まれる直前の新婚時代の続きをちょいとしてみんか。
それならいいわね。
モルジブはええとこらしいで。なんもない島に美しいサンゴ礁と水上コテージが並んでてな。
新婚時代の続きっていつからなの？
仕事納めしたらすぐや。旅行店に聞いてみんとわからんが、多分大晦日前には。
いや、今すぐがいい。
Ava nagged at his lips in a peevish yet flirtatious manner. The only sounds that filled the room were the distant voice of the announcer on the news which Hideyoshi had left on, and obnoxious pounding of the rain against the window. Okay, we'll see what happens later. There was a knock on the door and Genji-san entered.
奥様、お夕食の準備が整いました。お食事はまたこちらでよろしいですか？
ええ。ここへ運ばせなさい。南條先生はまだ厨房にいるのですか？
はい。次の一手を熟考したいとおっしゃっております。ご安心を。他の使用人たちとご一緒です。
源氏さんはじいさまの相手ができるくらいチェスが強いもんな。南條先生よりも強いらしいぜ。
そうなんだ。昔相手をしてもらったことがあるけど、あれは勝たせてくれたのかな。
マリア、もうすぐ飯だそうだぜ。しかし、よく一日中テレビを見ていて飽きねえな。
いつもテレビいっぱい見てるから平気。
マリアちゃんはテレビっ子なんだね。
食事だから机の上を片付けないとダメだぜ。
Earlier, we had torn several pages out of Maria's notebook, and there was now a mess where everyone had been rowing together. Jessica began cleaning that up quickly. Still, everyone here really can draw. I'd never guessed.
源氏、エヴァさんたちにもせめて食事くらい一緒にしないかとお声をかけなさい。どうせ断るでしょうが。
かしこまりました。
お父様の次はエヴァさんですか。つくづく後ろ宮家の食卓には全員が揃いませんね。
Natsuki felt her headache start throbbing again and lightly held her temples. What is wrong? Does she have a sickness or whatever? Like she's always having headaches, right? I guess we'll find out in the future. Okay, the distance from the kitchen to the parlor wasn't that great, so Genji had gone and come back by himself, but the guest room was a little farther away. Natsuki had warned him to avoid being alone whenever possible. And just now, Ananju had also admonished him, saying it would be better if he held a little more concern for his safety. Kanon accompanied Genji, and the two of them went to visit Eva and Hideyoshi in their guest room. Genji knocked in the door.
エヴァ様、秀吉様。お夕食の準備が整いました。
He waited a short while for them to come out, but there was no response.
源氏様、これは。
The door is open. Kanon pointed at under the door. A Western-style envelope had been inserted under it. Oh no, I told you, man. They were the only ones that were close, right? That needed to be teared apart. Is that the word again? How did they worded it? Let's see it again. Those remains shall tear apart the two who are close. Yes. Normally when something was inserted this way, it had been interpreted as a message from someone outside to someone in the room. So since this might be a private note meant for Eva and Hideyoshi, it was not something that Kanon and Genji were supposed to take interest in. But this Western-style envelope was one of Kinzo's, the same kind as the one Maria had taken out last night and surprised everyone with.
間違いない。親方様の封筒だ。
あるいは。
Even though this was one of Kinzo's envelopes, the letter Maria read aloud the previous night hadn't come from Kinzo. Genji continued knocking a little harder and called out in a loud voice.
エヴァ様、エヴァ様、源氏でございます。いらっしゃいますか。お返事をお願いいたします。エヴァ様。
but there was no response from the inside. Sometimes when the servants went to call some guests for a meal, the guests would be sleeping so deeply that they wouldn't wake up. In times like that, the servants would stick a letter in the door to show that it was time to come out and leave the guests be. But despite that, Genji beat even harder on the door and called out Eva's name. However, there was no answer. Kanon stuck his ear up to the door, held his breath and listened for any sounds coming from inside.
テレビの音らしきものが。でも気配が感じられません。お部屋は空っぽかも。
Genji took out a handkerchief and, careful not to touch it with his bare hands, gently pulled out the envelope that had been stuck under the door. It was sealed with the deep red sealing wax. Without a doubt, the mark on the sealing wax had come from the Oshiromiya family's head ring, or head's ring.
Eva-sama! Eva-sama! どうかお返事を!
They just kick the door, man. If they're not responding, yeah, just kick it.
もうお部屋にはいらっしゃいませんか?
But there was still no answer. There was a chance that those two were aimlessly walking around the mansion. This was the home Eva had grown up in, so there was plenty of reason to think that she had gone out on a casual stroll. Genji groped around his pocket and pulled out a bundle of keys, which contained the key that would open the guest room. Kanon also understood what this meant. They would sometimes unlock the door so they could go in and do things like make the beds, but only after they made sure the guests were out. To unlock the door for any other reason, and especially to do so when there was a chance that the guests hadn't given permission and might still be in there, was an action unbecoming of a servant. But Genji had decided, if the only problem had been that his knock hadn't received a reply, he would have gone this far, or haven't gotten this far. But the envelope under the door was doubtly one of Kinzo's, or rather one of the western envelopes of the Oshiromiya family head. After last night, the sender of this envelope could be someone other than Kinzo. If this letter had been sent by someone else...
申し訳ございません。お部屋を失礼させていただきます。
After giving that final notice, Genji stuck one of the keys from the bundle into the keyhole. There was a sound of the door unlocking, and after that, slowly turning the knob, he slowly started opening the door. And then we found him. The light seeped through the crack of the door. Were they in the room? Or had they forgotten to turn out the lights? It was the sound of the door chain being pulled tight. Oh, there was a chain inside. The chain had been secured. The chain couldn't be secured from the outside, so it also proved that they were in a room. The sound of the voice on the TV seeped out of the room. The lights, the chain, and the TV, all of these things made it clear that they were in the room. But there was no sign of them. Genji called to Eva once again through the crack of the door, but there was no answer.
Genji-sama, いかがしますか?
As part of their jobs, the servants were able to unlock almost any lock in the mansion, but they had no way to open a door with a chain. The only way to get by the chain was to cut it. That was certainly not permitted as part of the servant's usual work, but he gotta do it then. A creepy chill had rushed up their backs. Kanon held his breath again and tried to send someone through the door, but even so, he was not able to sense anyone.
私は奥様をお呼びしてくる。カノンがチェーンの切断を。
はい。
As Kanon hurried away to get a cutting tool, Genji called him to stop.
待てカノン。厨房に戻り、熊沢と行動するように。断じて一人で行動してはならんぞ。
はい。かしこまりました。
It looked like Kanon was wondering why he had to do something so troublesome in the middle of this urgent situation. But Genji had said it out of wariness. He didn't care what happened to himself, but in the worst case scenario, he didn't want anything to happen to Kanon. In the kitchen, Kumasawa was piling food in the serving cart, and Nanjo was waiting for Genji, apparently waiting, wanting to show him a move he'd finally thought up that might turn the tables on him. But Genji's appearance immediately told him that something was wrong.
おや、どうしましたか、源氏さん。
南條先生、申し訳ありませんが、この勝負は一度中断させてください。カノンはチェーンを頼む。熊沢、食事の配膳は一時中断し、カノンと同行するように。私は奥様のところへ行く。南條先生もご一緒に。
何かあったんですかな。
Genji took Nanjo, who still didn't know what was going on, and quickly left the kitchen.
熊沢さん、申し訳ありませんが、僕と一緒に来てください。
何があったんですか、カノンさん。
Kumasawa-san said almost the exact same thing as Nanjo, unable to take in the situation, and chased after Kanon, who had flown out into the hallway. Taking Kumasawa with him, Kanon went to the storage room and looked through the tools packed in toolboxes and hanging all over the walls, trying to find something that could be used to cut the chain.
何を探してるんですか。私も手伝いますよ。
ドアチェーンを切断するんです。大きめの番線カッターはどこだっけ。
ドアチェーンをどうしてそんなことをするんですか。
エヴァ様たちのお部屋にチェーンが。中にいらっしゃるはずなのに、お声をかけても返事がないんです。
It took Kumasawa some time to figure out how cutting the chain and Eva and Hideyoshi not answering were connected, but she did realize that this was an urgent situation.
これなら多分。
Kanon took down a very large wire cutter that had been hanging on the wall. It was called a cutter, but maybe it'd be easier to understand if he said it was a shape like a large pair of pliers. Kanon remembered once of being warned that this dangerous tool could easily cut through one of your fingers. Kanon took that and rushed up the stairs. He already knew instinctively. He should fight for every minute, every second to open it quickly. Or perhaps it was already...
待ってください、カノンさん。
It was already too late, right?
早く。
Kumasawa eventually caught up with him, gasping for breath with both hands on her knees. When Kanon changed his grip on the wire cutters and looked up at the door, he let out an struck speechless. What is that? Another one of this,
何ですかこれは。
That's not even a magic circle anymore. What the hell is that? Kumasawa screamed weakly, her face pallid. That was no surprise, because right there on the door, just like the magic circle that had been drawn onto the shutter of the Rose Garden storehouse, there was another eerie shape drawn with a blood-like paint. Also, there was something now there? This is just new? Earlier there was nothing there, right? However, it would be odd to call this one a magic circle, because unlike what most people would expect, it wasn't a circle with shapes drawn inside of it, but a slightly more complicated geometrical shape. However, those strange characters filling in the gaps, which weren't from the alphabet, were the same kind as the one on that magic circle on the shutter. But a thing that had Kanon struck speechless wasn't how eerie the magic circle was. It was something like this hadn't been there or here a short while ago. First, he had taken a trip back to the kitchen. After that, he'd gone to the storage room to grab a tool and headed right back. Put those together and it couldn't have been more than 5 minutes. How could someone add something like this creepy during that period of time? And as though it had just been drawn, The door itself was bleeding, several unsettling vertical red lines that slowly dripped down, getting longer and longer. Kumasawa's knees gave way and she sank down on the spot. If Kumasawa hadn't done this first, then Kanon surely would have wanted to.
ベアトリーチェ様
But the thing is, it's so instant, right? Like, it's been a couple minutes when Genji and what do you call this? Kanon left that to get basically, yeah, the cutter, and then Genji going there as well in the kitchen. And then for a couple minutes, it had this big magic, whatever you call it, not magic circle anymore, but yeah, those lines already on the door for some reason. It was so fast.
ベアトリーチェ様の仕業ですよ。恐ろしや恐ろしや。
Kanon gulped and then readied the wire cutter and approached the door. He didn't want to get close to the disturbing magic circle. He really didn't want to touch the steadily dripping substance that looked like blood. But if he didn't get close, he wouldn't be able to cut the chain. Fighting his cold feeling, he gulped again, and after gathering his courage, he went even closer, putting the wire cutter up against the chain. He then pressed with all his strength, managing to cut through the chain far more easily than he'd anticipated. The cut chain fell into two separate parts, which continued to clang as they swayed back and forth.
カノンさん、足元に封筒が。しかもこれは親方様のもの。
And like Kumasawa had also noticed a western envelope at the bottom of the door, and that the sealing wax had been sealed with the head's ring. Kanon hesitated for just a second over whether he should open the letter first or check the inside of the room. I would do both, honestly. But eventually he decided on fulfilling his original purpose. Kanon pulled a handkerchief out of his pocket. This was so he wouldn't leave fingerprints on the door. If his worst fears were realized, the police would want to investigate his room too. He slowly pushed the door open. He was able to more clearly hear the sound of the television, which had been seeping out faintly this whole time.
Eva-sama.
Eva was lying face up on the bed. On the bed with her shoes still on. Kumasawa, who had fearfully entered after Kanon and who was hiding behind his back, screamed a short eek again when she saw Eva like that. Eva's shoes had been the first part of her that Kanon had seen, so the oddness of wearing shoes in bed was the first thing to strike him. But when Eva's head shifted in his line of sight, Kanon couldn't help but let out a short scream like Kumasawa. Right in the middle of Eva's forehead, something had been placed? Something was growing there? No, right in the middle of her forehead. Was it an old-fashioned knife that or some weapon like it was sticking out? Jesus Christ. Golden Slaughterer. What is that music? At the base of where it was stuck in, blood dripped down, staining the sheets on the other side bright red. So their faces, or at least Eva's face, is not destroyed like the others, right? There's only like, I guess, a big knife. Or a knife, I say a knife, straight through the head, the forehead. Kumasawa's knees gave away once more and she sank down on the floor. Her mouth kept flapping open and closed, but she couldn't even scream. Eva was dead, with some kind of weapon sticking out of her forehead. Both eyes were open wide and the image of the person who killed her must have been burned into them. Yeah, so it's instant, I guess. They saw who did it and then got stabbed in the head that fast, right? Like, you couldn't react anymore. That's why they're saying, yeah, her eyes were still open. But only the mouth capable of naming that person had been shut for all entire eternity. Even though her forehead was the last place they wanted to look, they couldn't tear their eyes from it. Right there, the weapon was stuck into Eva's forehead, standing almost perfectly upright. And on the handle was a complicated design that you wouldn't expect to see on an ordinary weapon. The thing could be summed up with the word occult. It was a vulgar object with a design that might have been of some demon.
Hideyoshi-sama wa... Hideyoshi-sama!
Eva was on top of her bed, but the other bed was empty. Where was Hideyoshi? After taking a backwards glance at Kumasawa, still on her knees and stupefied, he checked the bathroom just in case. At the moment he opened the door, he was greeted by the steam and the sound of the shower. The bathroom was of the same familiar style as most hotel bathrooms. When taking a shower, a waterproof curtain was used to keep water from flying out. Oh my... You can actually see it now. Look at that. It's like a... I think it's like an ice pick? Kind of... No, not an ice pick, but... You know a lance, right? A lance, but smaller version of a lance. Right? I kind of like that. Or like a big screw. It's not even a knife. That waterproof curtain was half open. And lying tumbled down in the bathtub was Hideyoshi, completely naked with both eyes open. And pointing right at Kanon, just like Eva, a weapon with a demon-like design was stuck into his forehead. Since his head had been under the shower's hot water this whole time, his face wasn't half covered and filthy with blood like Eva had been. But the sight of him dead while still taking a shower was tragic enough. Just then, they heard Natsui's voice, coming from the hall. She was probably coming with Genji.
またしてもこのような落書きが。この手紙は中にはなんと。
いえ、まだ読んでおりません。
うかつに触らん方がいいですな。犯人の指紋が残っとるかもしれん。警察に渡した方がいい。
わざわざ手紙を残すくらいです。どうせ指紋など残っていません。
As Natsui said, she picked up the envelope. And before checking its contents, she entered the room herself where she found Eva dead.
エヴァさん、奥様、こちらには秀吉様も。
But who could do this though, right? I mean, so fast, yes, so fast. It's not that... I mean, Eva and Hideyoshi, someone could have done it, right? But the door, how did they do that so fast?
カノ、シャワーを止めてあげなさい。気の毒にも程があります。
はい。
Kanon gripped his handkerchief and twisted the valve, turning off the shower. In the bathtub, a small jar of body soap had fallen with its cap off. It really looked like he'd been attacked while taking a shower. There was still a small splash of blood clinging to the white bathtub, and the combination of red and white made a horrible contrast.
南條先生。
わかったら市販は出とらんな。死後硬直も始まっとらん。
Rigor mortis hasn't begun. That means it's just recent. Yeah.
おそらく殺されてから1時間経ったかどうかというところだろう。しかしこのような柄の短い凶器で頭蓋骨を考えられん。
Nanjo checked their pulse and their pupils, making certain of their deaths once more. There's a big thing in the middle of their forehead. Yeah, of course they're dead. As Kanon watches this business-like treatment, he thought, couldn't you tell at a glance that they're dead without doing all that? Nanjo thought about removing the weapon. Dude, why are you gonna remove the weapon though? But then decided it'd be better to preserve the scene and hand it over to the police, so he left it alone. but a close inspection of the base showed that it didn't have a blade. In fact, it was more conical than a blade shape. Yeah, I told you, it kind of looked like a lance, right? He noticed that rather than a knife, it's more like a short-handled spear, something with a shape better suited for crusting than slicing. Yes. Rather than a short spear, you might call it a thick ice pick. Yeah, something like that. At any rate, after looking at the scene, no further words were needed to describe what sort of terrible purpose such eerily designed weapons were originally made for. Nor was it necessary to explain how they carried out their function. Natsuki, hoping to escape the repulsive steam, filling the bathroom as soon as she could, covered her mouth with a handkerchief and dashed from the room. Just viewing their gruesome bodies for an instant had been enough to burn the image into her eyes. If she looked any longer, that image would surely remain in her vision for all eternity. The rising urge to vomit was exactly the same feeling she'd had that morning at the gardening storehouse. For a while, Natsuki couldn't help but stand with her back facing the guest room, fighting that sickness in her stomach. At any rate, we can't let the children... Yeah, George. Earlier? Or yeah, a couple episodes back, he was the only one, or his family was safe, right? And now both his mom and dad is gone. The George will break here now, yeah. But they could tell that those fiercely racing footsteps in the hallway belonged to George even before he came dashing into the room. George and the other children had been waiting in the parlor. However, when they saw Genji speak to Natsuki, when they saw her turn pale and fly out of the parlor, they felt a sense of foreboding. And when they saw a large group of people gathered around the guest room, they were sure of it.
Eva おばさんたちは無事なんだよな。おい、カノン君。これは何の騒ぎなんだ。
バトラ様。
Kanon didn't have anything to say. George's scream after he ran to the room told them everything they needed to know. Natsuki touched George's shoulder with her hand, but he finally shook her off. George fell over beside Eva and buried his face in the bed in front of his mother's face, wailing. Then he pounded on the bed with his fist over and over again. Butler had his back against the wall of the hallway and was covering his eyes with his right hand and weeping without restraint. Of course, it's sad whenever anyone dies, no matter who it is. But the butler, these or those left alone by the deaths of others, were far more worthy of pity. Everyone here now had lost someone close to them. George wasn't the only one to be pitied. However, George's pain was far greater than everyone else. He lost everyone, yeah. I guess he lost everyone. He lost Shannon, now he lost mom and dad as well.
そりゃよ、人はいつか死ぬぜ。人間誰だっていつかは死別の悲しみと戦わなきゃならねえ日が来るだろうよ。でもよ、そいつは兄貴にとってはずっと未来の話で、しかもそいつは一つずつ順番に訪れるべきもんじゃねえかよ。無ごすぎるぜ。やろう少しは人の情けってもんがねえのかよ。
おう、バトラ、泣かない泣かない。
Okay, this is the first time Maria is here. I mean, with a victim, right? Maria tried to comfort Butler in a mechanical sounding voice. Butler violently wiped his tears.
くそ、もう流さねえぜ。悔し涙も悲しみの涙ももう二度と流さねえぜ。全然ダメだ。俺たちは魔女様に爪を食らってるわけだ。主勢一方ってわけだ。そりゃダメだぜ。全然ダメだ。チェス盤がひっくり返っちまうぜ。野郎は俺たち羊が明日まで逃げる手段もなく怯えてるだけだろうと思ってるだろうよ。だからひっくり返すぜ。明日までこの島から逃げられねえのは野郎も同じだ。しょんべんちびりそうになりながら逃げ隠れするのは俺たちじゃねえ、野郎の方だ。暴いてやるぜ、必ずな。明日までに。いや、明日なんか待たねえ。今夜だ。今夜中にその胸ぐらをつかみ上げてやる。
Boiler room.
とにかくこの部屋は警察が来るまでこのままにして施錠します。いいですね。
Nazi announced it as though she didn't care whether they agreed or not. If anyone had a right to object, it would have been George, but it looked as though he'd shed enough tears. George nodded slightly, still facing away from the others, and then when he stood up, everyone else agreed to. Nazi still hadn't opened that western envelope of the family head that she'd picked up. But now that they decided to leave the room, she decided to unseal it in the parlor, where everyone could watch. Okay, so let us take a break here for now. God damn, can we see? It did upgrade the pictures, right? Characters. Ooh, it upgraded here a little bit. Gaseous, right? I wonder now. Look at this. It even has the Maria laugh on the page of Hideyoshi now. You can't see either of them by looking through the gap of the door while the chain is set. They can't see and can't reach. Go on. How could a human have killed them then? It's you. You little kid. You little brat. It is you. The other... Don't worry, everyone will be revived into the Golden Land. Okay. I'll be seeing her again, so I'm not lonely. What? He has the right to lament his ill fortune. She was chosen by the demon's roulette. That's all there is to it. Okay. Wait, is this Marius? No, like we're looking at this, right? No. When you go to the tips. Not tips, characters. Like, it looks like it's Maria's book or something, right? Or notebook. Because look at this, for Rosa. I'll be seeing her again, so I'm not lonely. And then we look at Hideyoshi here. She has the laugh here, right? So is Maria the one writing this? We start where it all begins. Kinzo usually comes back as soon as he gets hungry. Usually. Okay. I told you, man. I told you last episode. If something would have happened, it would be the two of them. And it happened already. And yeah, it's 7 p.m., right? It was not 12 p.m. Oh my god. Okay, I guess we're gonna be seeing deaths happen left and right now. We'll see. But yeah, poor George though. Lost everything. In the morning, he found out that Shannon was gone, and then at night, both of his parents were gone. I don't know what will happen with him. He's definitely gonna be broken now. Poor George. But anyways, we are gonna continue this and do more of Umineko When They Cry in the next one. So I'll just see you then. Bye bye.